Apparently, there is a music and the spoken word in Spanish as well, and the presenter. There are two presenters, one a woman and a man. So it's like a couple. This may be completely fake news, but I'm pretty confident I've heard of it.
Mornings are better with a warm beverage, even for Latter-day Saints. Meet Postum, the ideal coffee alternative and proud sponsor of This Week in Mormons podcast. Spotted on the coffee aisle at Smith's Grocery or at your local nearby store. Can't locate it? No worries. Order it at postum.com. Explore delicious recipes to tailor your Postum experience. Start your day off right with Postum.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Mormons, the International Edition. My name is Georgia Travers, and I'm joined here by
Daniel Yanez. Hello.
Hi, Daniel. How are you today?
I am good. I am happy because it's the 21st of June as the time of this recording. You may listen to this episode later, but technically today was supposed to be the summer solstice. I read then that it was yesterday, actually.
Yeah, because of the leap year. So it's a leap
Exactly.
year this year, so it's a day earlier.
Yeah, which is a bummer. I was really excited about recording during summer solstice. It's the sunset right now here in the UK, but the weather is nice. Finally, after probably one of the most dreadful spring seasons since I moved here, it barely crossed the 20-degree barrier, which would be like, I don't want to do the Fahrenheit conversion. Sorry.
70 degrees Fahrenheit
70?
is
Okay.
about 20 degrees Celsius.
Oh, yeah, you're right, because that's like the aircon temperature, the AC temperature for our American listeners.
You times it by 2 and add 30 Celsius to Fahrenheit, approximately.
Times 2 and add 30. Good. I'll remember that linear equation in my brain. I should know that. Like I'm enough of a nerd that by this time in my life, I should know that. But thank you for educating me.
I mean, I'm a physics teacher, so I have to know these things. But hey, I have a story about the solstice for you. Okay. So yesterday, it was summer solstice here, the 20th of June, and I was teaching a physics lesson to some year 8 students. They're sort of 13, 14 years old. And I was getting them to think about why we have longer days and shorter days in different parts of the world. And we were having a lesson on about the solstice on the solstice. So it was actually kind of fun. And one of the students, I got them to look up sunrise and sunset times for yesterday for lots of different places in the world. And I told them, you should choose some from the Northern Hemisphere, you should choose some from the Southern Hemisphere. And I was standing next to a student and she said, Chile is in the Southern Hemisphere, but I don't know any cities in Chile. I don't know how to, Google what the sunrise and sunset time is. And I said, well, I know a city in Chile. I know Santiago. And I thought about you and Daniel Ferreira, who sadly can't join us here this evening. And she said, great. I'll look up Santiago in Chile and I'll find out the sunrise and the sunset time there. Because was it winter solstice in Chile? Yeah.
It was winter solstice. Yeah. So the opposite, one of the most dreadful days there. And it's been raining like crazy in Chile, in Santiago this year, which is good from a drought point of view. Like it's been very dry the last couple of decades. Like I can't remember the last rainy year, but yeah, it's been rainy and very short days. However, like compared to the distance to the equator from Santiago is like the equivalent of like Miami or some kind of Northern Africa cities. Like the distances are quite odd. Like the UK is actually quite high up. Like when you compare it to the Americas, you're like in the middle of Canada. So we actually get super long days this time of the year here, and very short days then during Christmas, during the winter solstice. And that's something that really surprised me when I moved here. Like, I moved to the UK in late May during that half-term week. And I remember waking up at like 4 a.m. because I was jet lagged and the sun was up. I was like, that's very early. And it only got worse from there until June, until the summer solstice. And I found it fascinating. It felt like uncanny. Like there's sunlight at 3:30 a.m. I think sunrise was like 3:30 a.m. last night.
Something like that. Yeah. We are quite far north on the globe here. I remember a couple of years ago I was in St Andrews in Scotland, it must have been July. It was for a friend's wedding, and we were just dancing and having the party. And I remember going outside and it was 10 p.m. and there was still light, and it was the strangest thing because Scotland is that bit further north, but I am not complaining. I absolutely love the long days. I love that it's light pretty much all the time. So you will hear no complaints here from me.
Yeah, it's really cool. That reminded me, speaking of astronomical phenomena, a few weeks ago we had the Northern Lights as well. And I know it was not just in the UK, it was across the Northern Hemisphere because of that solar storm. We had that nice display. Do you have a chance to see it? Or
You know what? I was so skeptical of it, and I was awake while the Northern Lights were literally outside my window, and I just didn't believe that I would actually see it. And then about an hour later, all of these messages are kicking off for people who had actually seen it. But you mentioned that it was just in the Northern Hemisphere. Actually, I had friends in Australia who saw the Southern Lights as well. So it was, I guess the magnetosphere of the Earth, it was just really, really active at that specific time. So there were so many people who got to see
that's really cool.
That amazing phenomena. Did you see it?
Check. I did. Yeah. So I remember seeing something a bit odd. It looked like cloudy, because at the naked eye, the colors did not look as bright and colorful as in cell phone pictures. But I saw it, was like, is it or not? And then we drove like 5 minutes away from where we live, like to the edge of town with no light pollution. And there you could really see it. It was like really, really nice. And we went. And the saddest part is that my son was already, we had put him to bed. He wasn't asleep yet. And we told him, hey, do you want to come outside and see it? And we told him it was the Northern Lights. But he didn't understand. He was like, no, I don't care. He thought we were going to go watch some sports. Really random. So then we came back like an hour later and we were like, Santi, we saw the Northern Lights. He was like, what? The Northern Lights? And then I felt super bad because he missed it. So
he missed it. Well,
I guess we're going to have to go to Iceland sometime next year.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So later on this year, you're not going to believe this, I am going to Lapland in Finland.
Wow.
So my mum wants to take my daughter, so like a grandmother and granddaughter trip, to see Father Christmas, where he lives in Lapland at the North Pole. And I basically muscled my way into that trip because I was so jealous that they were going to be doing that. So the three of us are going. We're going the first weekend of December. So I don't know if the Northern Lights are out at that time of year, but we're going to be so far north that there's only going to be 3 hours of daylight is what we're told to expect. And it is so cold and so snowy that normal snowsuits just don't cut it. So they give them to you as part of the tour that we're going on, all of the equipment that we need. So we don't even have to take it with us. But I'm really excited about that. I think it's going to be really fun. And my daughter, she'll be 5 by then, which I feel is prime Father Christmas age to meet him and to enjoy with the elves and all the rest of it. So I'm really excited for that. So
and to remember as well, right? Like she's gonna have memories, right?
That's
true.
When they're
3, they might not have memories, right? But 5 onwards, I think is a sweet age for that, and also requires some bravery because I don't know if I would dare to go to a place that is that cold at that time of the year.
I mean, I'm a bit apprehensive about the 3 hours of daylight because I'm someone who loves the sunshine, as I mentioned before. But I've had a look at the place that we're going, and there's loads of fairy lights and lots of activities that we can do, and I think it'll be quite magical. So I think it'll be okay, and I think she'll love it. And obviously, it's so geared towards tourists and people visiting that. I mean, how can the North Pole not be fun? It'll be good. I'm excited.
Nice.
Yeah.
Looking forward to hearing about it in December.
Yes.
Cool.
To follow up.
Should we go into some, actually, maybe worth saying that we did not host our usual episode last month. Apologies, listeners. We missed you. I know you missed us too. So it's been 2 months since the last one. I think it was you and Danny Ferreira that did that one. So we've missed a lot of news, a lot of things that have happened, some really exciting stuff, some controversies as well. So what are some of the things we've missed that maybe we want to talk about, Georgia?
Well, there's one big thing that I have missed speaking about for literally the whole of 2024, and that is that Daniel Yanez, you composed the This Week in Mormons theme music. And we have not mentioned this.
We
I
have
keep
not
meaning to
mentioned that.
mention it every single month. So, that new tune, that really catchy tune that you hear at the beginning of every episode, that was composed by Daniel Yanez, and it was new for 2024, and I haven't mentioned it so far. So
Well,
credit to
thank you.
you.
Thanks for the shout out. I wonder what people think about it. Like, send us your feedback, the good one and the not so good one. But yeah, it was an exciting process to go through. Like, as some of the listeners that have listened to our episodes might know, I'm a musician. Besides being, a professional and a church member and a father and husband and all of that, but I spent a lot of my time making music, and I think that came up in one of our, I think in our final episode last year when we had that kind of all of the hosts together and we did a year in review, and I think that's when Kurt challenged me to, hey, come up with a theme song. I was like, okay, challenge accepted. So during Christmas, Christmas break, I had some ideas, and yeah, this was it. And there are some different versions. Actually, I have it here. Can you hear it? Is it fun? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Okay. I had some other versions, but I'm not going to play them now. It's going to be too disruptive.
I
But
think maybe on another day, though, we should get a special edition where we play one of the iterations, because I've been lucky enough to listen to a different iteration, and I
yeah.
really enjoyed it. Are you sure you don't want to play one of the others?
Well, I'm going to play the beginning of one. This is like the chill, laid back version. So if you can see me dancing to that. So that might come out one day, and maybe a
I
special
like that
episode.
one. I feel like it has kind of, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of Mexican-esque vibes to it. I don't know why.
I mean, it is acoustic. It's like I thought of it. I was like, I don't know if you have watched one of these late night shows from the US. What's his name? Jimmy Fallon. So Jimmy Fallon has a band, and they often make versions of songs with artists, but with like acoustic or toy instruments. So what I
Yes, I
did,
feel like I do know about this.
yeah, sometimes they bring like heavy metal bands like Metallica or others, and they make these versions with like literally like toy ukuleles and whatnot. And so I made the official theme song, and then I played this one. I was like, how would that sound like in kind of like a more toyish version? And that's what I did.
I
So
see.
more versions coming up one day, and yeah, we like to keep it fun. And Danny Ferreira is also a musician. We still have a band. Both of us are away from Chile, but we're still working together. And one of the things that have happened in these last 2 months is that we're recording our next album. 15
Oh, that's
songs coming
exciting.
up.
As in across continents, that you can still do that you can add the parts from different places?
Basically, yeah, we've done it already with a few songs, but mostly as singles or as short EPs. But this will be a full-length album, and we just recorded the drums a week or two ago. We have a session drummer in Chile that plays with us, and yeah, he recorded all the tracks. So hopefully within this year we're gonna release it, and if we do, we're gonna make sure to give it a shout out here as well, because yeah, you might like some of the lyrics. There may be some LDS references even here and
Oh,
then.
well, I'll
Yeah.
make sure to look out for it then.
They will be in Spanish, unfortunately, but yeah, I can send you the lyrics with Google Translate.
I'll have to brush up on my Spanish, hey?
Yeah, well, this is an opportunity. Always an opportunity.
Yeah, and speaking of Spanish-speaking news, so last month, Tiffany on one of her Tiffany and Friends for You editions mentioned that Utah has now formed its first Spanish-speaking state. And at the time of recording, Tiffany asked us, as the internationals, for our views. So we'd like to take this opportunity to just reply and give our comments. So Daniel, do you have any initial thoughts on this? I have many.
Well, first of all, thank you, Tiffany, for thinking of us and for asking us. I remember listening to that episode and feeling like I want to say things as well. I've forgotten everything that I thought to say since then. But I think I've always been kind of with like on a 50-50% kind of position about language-based units. I've seen firsthand both the benefit but also the downsides of that approach. When I lived in Utah, I spent, I think, over 50% of my time there in Spanish-speaking wards and branches, and I think that they add so much value, especially when it comes to the immediate needs of members. Of course, the demographics, the needs that you experience in a ward that is mainly made up from immigrants, many of them immigrants in very precarious conditions, mixed with other immigrants as well that might be more established, or from locals, but that are kind of first generation or second generation, right, raised there, so they still have a lot of the culture from their places of origin, uh, or also many Americans that, because of missions, because they married somebody from Latin America, they decided to stay there, and they are champions of those communities. Uh, it's a really rich environment to experience church, and in a way, it reflected much more my upbringing in the church. Uh, but at the same time, that puts a lot of strain on leadership and members. Maybe that's mostly on my direct experience. I was there in the late 2000s and early 2010s, and the church was growing very quickly in the Spanish-speaking communities. To the point that my last branch there, during my last year before moving back to Chile, it was a branch, but with 350, 400 people attending on average.
Wow.
We were
Wow.
serving in primary with my wife. Primary alone was 100 kids every Sunday, or 80 to 100. We had
I
two classes
literally
per
cannot
age group.
imagine.
Yeah, we had like 25, 30 teachers. Only, like, primary on its own was bigger than our previous ward by 1.5 times basically the attendance. And we ran sharing time and everything on 2 shifts. So we had like because it was the
Cannot
3-hour block.
imagine
Yeah,
the logistics of herding that many children would
yeah.
be insane.
Yeah. It was great, but it was fun. I was the primary pianist, and to this date, it's probably, if not the top calling I've ever held, it's in the top 3 easily. And now in my new ward, I'm doing that again. I'm so excited. So the fact that the church is growing to the point that wards are being divided and kind of right sized, and now that they have taken this extra layer of having a Spanish speaking stake, if I recall correctly, some of the quote unquote selling points or the value adding points that were shared when that came out is to provide members with an opportunity to serve across all layers of leadership possible. And that to me is really, really big. I did experience as a member in a ward, sorry, in a branch in Spanish, or in wards, that they are little bubbles, and they tend to operate completely detached from the rest of the kind of local American wide leadership. And I had some bad experiences as a result as well. I don't want to go into details, but I did experience racism and prejudice, and oftentimes, most of the time, it was inadvertent, right? But the lack of connection and kind of knowing who to go to for support in situations like that, or the lack of visibility or attention that Spanish-speaking branches received uh, from stake leadership was palpable, right? So I'm very much not just in favor. I'm very happy that they're doing this. That does leave me with the thought of what will it take to not have to do that, right? What will it take to actually have units where you have the greatest degree of diversity possible, and the best context to drive inclusion and equity, which would be to have, all members, locals, any language, in just one single unit. I do wonder what it would take. I see why we do it, because the immediate need is greater, but I look forward to a
Yeah.
true Zion day when that's not needed.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that. So, if I can just jump in. So, I can't remember if we've spoken about this in detail, but Daniel and I were part of a ward which closed in March of this year, and we have been split into uh, a couple of different wards within our stake. Daniel is in one ward, I'm now in another ward, so we very rarely see each other and each other's families anymore, which is really sad. But I've joined a huge ward, so it's at least 30% bigger than any of then the second biggest ward within the stake, which is the ward that Daniel's in. And we do have lots of different types of people and lots of different backgrounds. And there's a few interesting things that our ward are doing, which from listening to Tiffany a month ago, I'm led to believe is not the case everywhere. So a couple of examples, we have prayers in other languages and they are not translated into English. So you just kind of listen for the amen at the end and you agree and say amen. We have testimonies on Fast and Testimony Sunday in other languages, but they are translated. So people can bear a testimony in their mother tongue, and then that will be translated by someone who
That's really cool. Haven't seen it yet.
knows English. Yeah, so we had I think it was either a Portuguese or a Spanish testimony. We've also had a German testimony, I believe. We have a Spanish Sunday school class, and last week, was it last week or maybe the week before? I can't remember. I was teaching the Relief Society lesson in the ward, and I decided to do an exercise where I asked people to give me a name for the Saviour. And I specifically said to them, can you give me a name for the Saviour in your own language? And I received all English names and I was really confused. And then at the end of the class, I found out that there was a Spanish Relief Society class happening at the same time as our Relief Society class as well. And that's why I hadn't had, anyone give me a name for the Saviour in Spanish, because they were all in a different class and I hadn't even realized. So we have those opportunities within our existing ward structure without creating kind of a separate unit for Spanish speakers. We have opportunities for them to be able to discuss things and be able to learn gospel doctrines within our current ward.
Yeah.
That being said, that coming together of the different cultures has led to our ward being a little bit tricky. Like it's hard to gel at the moment. It's hard to feel like a united ward because we don't necessarily know each other, and we're a new ward that is formed from 3 previous wards. So. Yeah, it's come with its own teething issues, but I think we're getting there now. I'm feeling a lot more positive than I was, and I feel like there's lots of different types of people who I can learn from, who I can get to know. So I think overall it's been positive. How's your experience of your new ward been, Daniel?
It's a good question. It is challenging to. I guess my experience, I can only speak of my personal experience. I think I kind of arrived to that kind of closure of a ward with so much kind of responsibility on my shoulders, because I was the bishop of that ward. If all time listeners may remember, and that kind of the momentum and kind of the focus on it, I was like really fully absorbed by that, and that stayed with me for a few weeks after that. Right, it was a lot of investment on that process, and it was an absolute blessing to go through it, and to be there for those that needed support through that, and all of it. And I think the momentum from that really kept me going for the first few weeks really nicely. But then and only then gradually I started to see, kind of wards are different, and the new ward is fantastic. Like that first Sunday there was an incredible experience. It was so nice and touching to see that while we were grieving the dissolution of over a century old ward that we were, and all of that, what that meant, we were thinking so much of that we were not really thinking of what this other ward was feeling. They were really looking forward to receiving us, with open arms and all of that. And that first Sunday, it was really, really thoughtful. Everything that they did, they had all of these little things to make us welcome. And that first Sunday was fantastic and really, really touching. And but then over the weeks, you do feel, there's a different culture, a different way of doing things. There are relationships that are, years or decades old with members in both wards, right? And that will take time. That will take time and friction and kind of spending time together to really gel all together. So when I go on Sunday, I feel the love because I know that they're working hard to love us, but there's still kind of work to do to create a a cohesive community. And these days, it's not that easy. It was easier in the past when I guess people had more time to spend at church, and kind of there were more activities focused across wards. I think so much of our attention has shifted to younger generations, which it is a critical need, 100%. But I do wonder sometimes how much we have traded off uh, by dedicating that bandwidth there, and maybe at the expense of kind of wider, more cross
Yeah.
generational
Yeah.
community building.
I think your comments are really interesting because we've had two completely different experiences. So I think one thing I wanted to say is you went from, being a bishop to being a ward member within a congregation. And I think it must feel extremely strange to suddenly have that loss of identity in terms of your place within the ward. And I feel like that must have been especially tricky for you when you put so much time and energy into cultivating an amazing ward that we were part of. And so then it must be difficult to kind of hand over the reins in an instant and to suddenly see things being done differently. It's really nice to hear that first Sunday you were welcomed with enthusiasm, because we kind of had the opposite with our new ward, because we had a new ward being formed. And whilst I'd initially hoped that it would be, a really revelatory experience, if that's how you pronounce that word, not sure.
Don't ask me.
This is true. I should probably know. It just all felt quite chaotic. So what they did is they released everyone who had been serving in a ward calling across the 3 wards, and then they called new ward leadership in a new ward. But I think that the problem, which couldn't be solved, is that because the new leaders were being called that first week, they hadn't had time to make any decisions for what they wanted to do with the ward. So for a couple of weeks, it all felt a little bit strange and a little bit chaotic is the only way to say it, because nobody really knew what was going on, because the leadership was brand new, but they were expected to kind of swim in the deep end whilst learning to swim. And I think that was really hard for them. We're kind of finding our feet now. We've got a special second hour, I think, next week, where they're going to talk about unity and our ward, sort of our ward vision, I believe. And they've said that they want us to think celestial, which is something that we hear quite a lot nowadays. So I'm hopeful, but yeah, I think we had different experiences with the 2 different wards. And I feel like ours is kind of on the upwards trajectory now after an initial bumpy couple of months, but I think we're getting there. Actually, one thing I wanted to mention as well is the new hymns. So now we're in different wards. Obviously, our experience on a Sunday is going to be completely different. And last week, I thought it was really nice. They put together such a lovely program for the Sunday service, and we sung one of the new hymns. We sung "I Will Walk with Jesus," and it felt really nice. It felt like the song had a different feeling to the usual songs that we hear in the hymn book. And then that was followed up by an intermediate musical item by all of the children up to the age of 18. So right from your 4-year-olds, my daughter in primary, all the way up through the youth to the 18-year-olds. And they sung a song which isn't in any hymn book at all. It was a song called "That Someone" by Shauna Edwards. So Shauna Edwards is a Christian songwriter, and it had, again, a very, very different feeling to it. So we had these 2 new songs. Not that the Shauna Edwards one is going to appear in any hymn book, but who knows? Yeah, true, it might do. But it was just really nice, and it felt a little bit different, and it felt more similar to the type of worship that I used to experience when I was part of a Church of England church, when they had kind of paid people who were in a band who were playing the music. And I'm now hopeful for the rest of the songbook that it's going to lead us in a bit of a direction with the music. But hey, as a musician, I'm keen for your views on the new hymn book. I'm keen to hear if you've sung any of the songs in your new ward and the logistics. Just tell me everything.
Yeah, this is one of the biggies that we missed because of the 2-month gap we had. I'm excited. I have views both at a musical level, also some comments about my experience so far with them. So in my current ward, we still haven't sung any of the new ones. And one of the cool things of no longer being a bishop is that now I can play the organ and the piano again in sacrament meetings. So I'm part of the rota to play there. Not that I never played as a bishop. Sometimes I did, and I quite
Very
enjoyed
true.
it.
Sometimes you were even playing the prelude music as well, and then you just glide over to the stand as well.
And conduct. I think there might have been even a Sunday or two where I did double duties, like playing and conducting, kind of summer Sundays and things like that. But yeah, I'm super excited about it. I think members are a little bit excited as well because I take my liberties and I play different arrangements of the hymns when I play. And I had a couple of the younger kids actually a few Sundays ago when I played. They were like, "Why were you doing that? That was so cool!" And all I was doing is just playing slightly different chords for some of the melodies, and I love doing that. It's part of like probably one of the deepest part of my personal worship is worshiping through music, and within that is just playing on Sundays and kind of bringing that part of me to these songs in a respectful way. Of course, it's not a kind of a whenever I feel like it crosses the boundary towards like showing off or something like that, it doesn't work, and I pull back. And if I do, I usually make a mistake if I do that, so I can self-correct that way. But I really enjoy that. So I've been pushing to sing some of the new hymns. There are a couple that are quite well known already, especially "Come Thou, Fount of Every Blessing," has been in the hymn book in the past. Members know it because the Tabernacle Choir really popularized it in the 2000s, and so I've been like, when are we going to sing this? And they came back to me, the music leader for the ward, with this really like long-term plan to sing them. Like first we're going to have the ward choir to showcase it, and then like a very staggered plan. And only in like late July we were going to sing it. And I was like, that's good, probably for the brand new hymns, but there are a couple that we can start singing now, or we can just, because when they released this news, they gave some suggestions that are very sound. For example, play one full verse, no singing, but people become kind of catch what the full verse is, and then you start singing, or having a soloist sing the first verse, and then the rest join with the second, third verse, and whatnot. So I'm really looking forward to doing it in my ward. So, brother, music leader, if you're listening, please. But yeah, looking forward to doing that. Now, as far as the new hymns, I do want to ask you as well, because when these news were announced back in 2018, because it's been a really long process of arriving to this first batch, and from what I've heard and read, it's been a relatively painful process and a surprisingly not heated, but hotly debated process.
Yes.
I think there were a lot of expectations of what type of music were they going to approve. You know, one of their tenets was to make it more of a reflection of the global church and things like that. And I must admit that I was a little bit, I don't know if disappointed, but unimpressed with the selection of hymns from a stylistic point of view. I think they remain very kind of American Eurocentric in terms of musical style and kind of where
Agreed.
they stand in the range. I think that there were a couple of additions. There was one that was like a French carol, which I found quite nice, like a traditional song that comes from that country and whatnot, and some other classics here and then. But overall, I think if anything had the expectation then that we were going to bring like I don't know, this kind of Latin dancey music, which we do have, Christmas carols that are very much like salsa songs, you know, and people use them for worship and all of that. So if anybody had kind of that hope, I think this is already potentially an indication that no, we'll probably stay very devotional, right? Or maybe not. Who knows what the next releases will bring? But this first pass, I was a little bit telling that we are going to be probably a bit more conservative
Yeah, it
than some
certainly has
thoughts.
that feel, doesn't it? I'm just looking at the 13 new hymns now. I did instantly note that they are all very focused on the Savior, which they should be, you
Yeah,
know. But yeah, I hadn't picked up that there's a French Christmas carol. That's nice. Let's see what the next
yeah,
batch brings to us, hey, because it could be completely different. But I do think they will be missing a trick if they don't reflect the culture of the global
yeah.
culture of the church. I think they'll really be missing something there. So I'm hopeful for the future that they will include
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's going to
something
be
else.
500 hymns and we've only seen 13, 13, yeah, there's
Yeah.
plenty of room for diversity in music. But yeah, for Spanish speakers that are listening, we really need to get Mi Burrito Sabanero there. That's that's a Christmas carol from Venezuela. As far as I know, I hope I'm not offending anybody if it's not from Venezuela. But we sang it in the tabernacle when I was just married, 2007. There was this Christmas program in Spanish, one of the first that they put together with an actual choir and not just like dancing. And we sung all sorts of Christmas carols from from Spain, from South America, and one of those was that. And we had like a proper like Latin band playing it and a little kid singing it, and it's one of the most delightful pieces of music you'll hear about Mary and Joseph on a donkey headed to Bethlehem. That's the song, but and the song is from kind of the perspective of the donkey, so it's quite
Okay.
nice, right?
I'll have
So
to listen to it after we finish recording. You've opened my eyes. I hadn't even contemplated that there would be, Christmas carols and from all places in the world. I'm going to have to look this
yeah,
up now.
yeah, it will be fun. It's going to be a
Yeah, I
year-long
will do.
process. Well,
Yeah.
and speaking of music, this week was eventful. This is kind of going back to more local Utah news, but music and the spoken word finally had the handover where the long-standing host slash presenter, as they say here in the UK, Lloyd Newell, left, and now the new presenter arrived. Can't remember his name, but it was quite nice to see the farewell in social media. I think it was on my Instagram that he popped up when the choir was singing "God be with you till we meet again" to Lloyd Newell and his wife. I don't know her name, unfortunately. They're going as mission presidents, so big change there. Now, having said that, Georgia, do you have like is music and the spoken word kind of any relevance to you as a church member the last 10 years, or not being from that area? What's your connection with that, if any?
I don't really have a connection to music and the spoken word. Is this something that people actually watch in
So
Utah, or is it watched around the world?
here's my connection with it. So I became aware of it when they started broadcasting conference via satellite to Chile in the late 90s or maybe the year 2000. And they invited us to join the Sunday morning session half an hour earlier because that's when music and the spoken word, or música y palabras de inspiración, as they call it in Spanish, um, started. And yeah, you would just sit there and watch the Tabernacle Choir and this guy kind of sharing some words that were dubbed, so we didn't really get to hear his voice much.
Well, I
But
was going to say, did they have a Spanish presenter? No, they just
yeah,
had the person who was presenting it. Do you want to know something that I find quite disappointing? They didn't pick a woman. They had every opportunity to do so, and they chose not to. I'm
yeah,
really quite I'm quite onto that at the moment. If there is an
mm,
opportunity for them to call a woman to a certain position within the church, then I feel like maybe they are missing a trick not to do that at this
yeah.
specific point in history. But I guess I've got to trust the process a little bit more,
Yeah, I
maybe.
might be mistaken. I might have heard it in Twim actually, or in some other show, friendly show, that in Spanish. I haven't really listened to it in Spanish. Apparently, there's a music on the spoken word in Spanish as well, and the presenter. There are two presenters, one a woman and a man. So it's like a couple. This may be completely fake news, but I'm pretty confident I've heard of it. And I think the context in which I heard it is that it was the basis that somebody was suggesting that yeah they could get either a couple or a woman to host it now, but that is not the case. And yeah, I think when I moved to Utah, I saw that the, I mean the church takes a lot of pride on this program being almost a century old. I think like 80, 90 years that's been running continuously, and that's quite a feat. Like it's quite impressive. But I believe it's mostly
That is
older
impressive.
generations that had a habit of listening to it. I mean,
Okay.
it's on a Sunday, and many people are at church during the time it goes there. But many people go in the afternoon to church, or there are different times. So I'm not really sure, but it is a bit of an institution, and I think that all of those, like Newell at least, became kind of a staple. and kind of an
Yes.
icon for the general church experience through general conference, in my opinion. So he's going to be missed.
Yes, and moving on to our next piece of news, he literally worked right until his last weekend because he is going, as you mentioned before, to be a mission leader along with his wife. And this week, just yesterday, on Thursday, the 20th of June, they started their new mission leaders seminar training. And they've had 3 speakers yesterday. They had President Holland, they had Elder Cook and Elder Christopherson, all sharing messages about how these mission leaders can help their missionaries and train them, and obviously messages centered on Jesus Christ as well. So lots more to come there, because we've got the next few days. They'll still be in their training sessions. They're going to hear from lots of different, with the Quorum of the 12, First Presidency, along with organization leaders, I hope, as well. Mm-hmm. So lots more to come there, but just to mention that that's happening this week. And we know that Lloyd and his wife will be there. I have a question for you. When I was sort of looking at the different instruction that our church leaders have been given to the mission leaders, I wrote down Elder Holland, and then I realized he's now President Holland because he is acting president for the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. And I wondered, why do we not just call him Jeff? Why do we not just call Elder Cook Quinton? I just wonder it, because I have just moved into a calling where they're now calling me president, and I would much rather just be called Georgia. Yeah. So why do we formalize it so much? And why do we call them elders? As missionaries. Why do we call them elders rather than just calling them by their first names?
So many thoughts. Let me start with a bit of a not a tangent, but like a kind of an adjacent point on the title of elder, and this is a language thing. Do you know that in Spanish, because we have like high priests, we have elders, we have deacons, we have all of those offices in the 2 priesthoods, and all of them have a translation. For example, a deacon is a diácono in Spanish, a teacher is a maestro, a priest is a presbítero, but an elder is an elder. It's an anglicized word that we do not translate. The actual translation is anciano, and we don't use it because that means old man, and I guess it just sounds awkward. And whoever was at the point that the church was starting to go, I guess, to Mexico or to Spanish-speaking places, they just didn't bother translating the office of elder, and they kept saying elder. That's why when you go on a mission, my name tag said Elder Yañez, even though it should have said Anciano Yañez. And here's the trickiest part. At least I know of at least one language that does translate it. In Italian, they refer to elders as anziano, which is almost the same word as in Spanish, just a different letter, a Z instead of a C. So why is it translated in Italian, but not in Spanish or other Romance languages? I have no idea. I can only assume, a bit cynically, that is part of our kind of Americentric kind of culture within the church, that we did not translate that word. There's another word that we do not translate, garments. Instead of calling them vestiduras or kind of an equivalent translated word, we call them garments, with that, like a Spanish accent, but it's the same word. Why don't we do that? And it's on all official documents. I have no idea. If any Spanish speakers that know more about the linguistic history of the church want to weigh in, send us an email or something, because that's always been at the back of my mind, and now you just reminded me. Like, why is that? So I don't know. Speaking of how we refer to leaders, as a now former bishop, I loved when people called me Daniel, and there were a few members that kind of refused to call me bishop, but I knew it was not because they didn't sustain me or something like that. It's just that our relationship was that of I was Daniel to them, right? And they.
I always called you Daniel. I don't feel like I called you bishop, actually.
Yeah,
I feel like
yeah.
that's one of the, yeah.
So, but others, like there's a culture within the church, which I think is the prevalent one, that once somebody's called, you refer to them as a title. There's kind of a sort of reverence to the calling, to the mantle, as they tend to say, which I see the point, but I think that when we overdo it, like it's a slippery slope to creating an aura and kind of a hero worship type culture and an infallibility expectation. And I think the more we move away from there, the better. So I do see the recognition, though, especially um, with female leaders, with youth leaders, with leaders that sometimes do not get the recognition that their callings deserve. That at least the way I see it is that referring to them by their title in a way can signal that we see that authority, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, the trade-off can be what you're saying. It might sound unnatural. We might be putting people on a pedestal. And all I know is that Joseph Smith, in the early days, people referred to him either as Joseph or Brother Joseph, more colloquially, rather than President Smith. Like, when I say President Smith, I think of Joseph Fielding Smith, kind of those 20th century prophets. But Joseph Smith um, was Brother Joseph. And I'll finish with
Yeah.
this. In Spanish, we don't call Joseph Smith Joseph Smith. We call him Jose Smith. We translate his name. Why do we do that and not the other? I have no idea. So please, listeners, if any of you know, let me know. Go down the rabbit hole, come back and let us know, because it's really bothering me
Yeah,
now.
that is so confusing. I feel like maybe it's just that kind of organic spreading of the gospel, that certain things
Yeah,
were adopted and certain things weren't. But
it is
who
indeed.
knows? But that's kind of a bugbear of mine at the moment. First of all, it was the initials, Jeffrey R. Holland, and I'm kind of over that now because I feel like Elder Kieran advocated for us, so I'm over it. But now my next thing is, why are we so formal about things? Because I find it really hard to explain to people that I'm part of a church in the UK, yet the terminology that we use, president, is such an American word. You think stars and stripes, you think an eagle when you're thinking of a president, in my opinion. You're thinking about the White House, Air Force One. At least that's my association with the word president. And I would
Yeah.
prefer it if we just called each other by our names. I feel like it would just make us so much more human. But
Yeah. You just
those are
made me
just my
think.
thoughts.
Just made me think of the potential link, and this is completely, this has no basis, but uh, the U.S. is a very presidential kind of a society, right? Like the way that their constitution works with, the three branches, and the executive branch, has the president is the leader of that, and also the commander in chief. Like, it's very centralized in that presidential figure, and that word, it's kind of second nature to them. And there's an expectation of a president that is the embodiment of, America and whatnot.
And their
But
values, yeah.
and their values, but here it's a parliamentary, a constitutional monarchy with a parliament, and the leader of the ruling party is the prime minister, and that can change. There's less of a. I mean, it is a very pivotal and important figure, but it's not a president, right? I guess there's that difference. Chile is very presidential as well. It's a presidential republic, so I'm used to that as well. In a way, it's much closer to the American experience. So interesting. I
Yeah,
never thought of that.
yeah, and I'm totally not in tune with that at all. So to me, president just seems like a very American word. So I'm struggling with the adoption of that new title. But I do appreciate the fact that I am being referred to as a president. The next thing that we definitely need to change, we're calling them mission leaders, but I think we need to rebrand mission president and mission president's wife. I think they both need to be president, or they need to be, brother and
Yeah.
sister, or I just think they need to do something there.
Yeah, they have made an effort. Even the Mission
Yeah.
President Seminar, that used to be the name of it, and now it's
And
Mission
now it's mission
Leaders
leaders. Yeah,
Seminar.
yeah, I think they've come some way, but I really do feel like the female mission leader contributes just as much as her male counterparts. So I feel like having parity in the name would go a long way. But I suppose they can't really be president and president because they'll typically share the same surname, and then that becomes difficult when distinguishing
Yeah.
between them. So
Yeah.
I just wish there was a different way of doing it.
That's why you have a first name for practical purposes, right? That's
there we
interesting.
go.
I think it happens with temple presidents as well, where the wife of the temple president is the temple matron, which is one of those words that I don't know even what they mean because we don't have that in Spanish, but it's essentially the leader of the sisters within the kind of the temple community and temple workers and all of that. And it is a very significant leadership role for women in the church.
But why is it called a matron? Because my understanding of the word matron is that it is and correct me if I'm wrong, listeners, it's a title given to kind of the head nurse of a ward in a hospital.
Yeah,
That's where I've heard the word matron before.
yeah. That makes sense. Like I didn't know what the use for the word matron was in English, but in Spanish, the cognate, so matrona, the word that sounds the same, it's what do you call it? Like a nurse, but for delivering babies. What's the title
A
of
midwife.
a midwife? That's what it means. So it would be the temple midwife. If you translate it in Spanish. I don't know what the term is in Spanish actually. Do they just call it the temple president's wife, or I don't know? It's a good
Again,
question.
something we'll have to find out. But I feel like we're having a really fascinating discussion today. And
very
and
language focused. Yeah. Well, we're the
Definitely very
international
language
episode, so yeah, and we have a community of listeners, many of whom have lived abroad, either through service missions or they just happen to have an international experience. So I hope you're finding this entertaining, and if not, well, it's a window into a different experience.
into a different world, definitely.
Indeed. Yeah, actually, the next one, we'll see if we have time to go a bit deeper on this one, or maybe not. But something new also that has gone on this week is that the church educational system, also referred to as CES, held its first religious education conference. While it is the first one that is branded that way, it comes from an annual symposium that they used to hold with CES employees, so a seminary and institute people. I'm not sure if they included the universities as well then, but this first conference, kind of worldwide conference, was broadcast, and it included all of the institutions that fall under CES, including the BYUs and the other church higher education programs, which I found quite interesting. There were a few speakers. The article is in the church news for those that want to read it. It's going to be on the show notes. And Elder Gilbert spoke. He shared 5 points that might be fun to go through them if we have time. But the first paragraph kind of struck me. I've had a lot of feelings about the church educational system recently. I have a long history with them because my father, he was a seminary coordinator for most of his adult life, most of his career. Actually, he was in CES, and so I was quite close to it, and I loved it. Like I would go with him to seminary graduations and their monthly super Saturdays that they used to hold. It was my way of knowing more church members as well when I was young. I had that privilege, right, of going around Santiago and meeting tons of people and playing the piano and whatnot. But and my experience with seminary was fantastic. Now I'm seeing the seminary experience these days through my children. 20 to 23 years later on, and I I was yearning for them to have kind of an equivalent, similar experience, but I felt that it has changed a lot. And I don't know how I feel about some of those changes. I feel that what used to be one of the most kind of academically oriented experiences that the church provided for youth, it's very watered down now, right? That there's been a shift that I think has been positive in kind of its direction, but probably a bit miscalibrated in what it looks like in reality, where there's like very little demands on it. It's very much like come follow me ish, kind of very high level and focus on feelings rather than on let's know the scriptures, right? Like if we're church members and this is our canon, we better know it, right? So let's go first there and study it and then take away from it the spiritual, but let's study it through an academic lens. That was seminary for me. An institute, I know, is a similar experience, even though I went through only 1 year of institute. And then I went through BYU, so that kind of counts, but not quite. So yeah, I've been a bit frustrated with that as a parent now. So one of the quotes from him at the start of his talk was, quote, "Young adults are coming to institute at record levels. Young adults are attending church schools at record levels. They are striving to take charge of their testimonies and grow closer to Jesus Christ." Close quote. So I find that great, but I do also find it a little bit like, let's tap ourselves in the back, because what I see, at least through the lens of, well, having been a recent bishop, having kids now in seminary, and peers that have gone recently through the program, it doesn't quite match that reality. And I don't know how much my sample and my kind of rich is a representation of the overall experience. It looks like at the general level, at least, it's really thriving. But I do wonder, kind of that average that the church might take, and the conclusion they draw is, yeah, we're thriving as a church educational system. Uh, those left in the margins of that experience, I do wonder if that's being
I have an
caught.
observation though. When you said it feels like they're kind of tapping themselves on the back, I have the observation that there are more church members now than there were in the past. So surely it matches that proportionally there would be more members enrolled in seminaries and institutes because our church population is larger than it was. So actually, I wonder the percentages of members enrolled at any one time. And I wonder, rather than just taking the numerical value, if they took the percentage value, if that might look a little bit different potentially. I don't know. I also feel like that statistic could largely be due to the fact that they're making seminaries and institutes more accessible to people in terms of moving them online. So maybe more people are enrolled but not fully committed, perhaps, because maybe they're not required to have their camera on or all those sorts of things. I have a very limited perspective on this because I joined the church when I was 20. So I didn't graduate from seminary. I didn't graduate from institute either because I did do 1 year of institute in my final year of university, but then I moved away, I got married, etc. So I never went back because I feel like it's not really something that married people do. Go to
Yeah,
institute, do they?
that's an interesting point. Like in the past, definitely, and in a way, in the past, I felt that institute was kind of like, I saw it through the lens of my elder brothers, but it was a bit of an excuse just to find a spouse, kind of the
Yeah,
BYU
and
equivalent, but in the rest of the world.
but
Uh,
I wish it had been pushed for young marrieds as well because I think I
yeah,
could have really benefited from it.
I think it has shifted. Like overall, like what used to be like young single adult devotionals and things like that. Now it's been very much rebranded as young adult activities, and to be inclusive of both single and married. But I do wonder if that has trickled down to the institute experience, because I think the intention is that it's for everybody, but the de facto situation is that people mostly go there if they're single. Yeah, and missing out on that experience. But I'm glad to see that the church is kind of trying to streamline things across the globe. We're not going to have time to go through the five different things that Elder Gilbert spoke about. We might come back to that maybe on the Patreon episode. We'll see. You can subscribe to Patreon and get an extra 15 minutes of deliberation and conversation there. So that's the plug for Patreon.
Yeah, I know that you really wanted to talk about this. Did you have any other sort of burning points that you wanted to mention, or are you happy to
Not
move
really.
on?
No, that's all good. Let's move on to the next one.
Okay, so I will talk us through this next piece of news. So we're jumping over to Africa for two pieces of news, actually. The first one is that the church has regained its legal status in South Sudan. So for those of you who don't know, back in, I think, the early 2010s, Sudan became its own nation. So it's actually the newest nation in the world as it currently stands. And due to the civil war there, they lost their status due to kind of the paperwork wasn't put in. The church lost its status there, but it's recently regained its legal status, so it's recognized, and there is a branch there with 82 members. So for those people who live there, that's obviously extremely significant for them. And then the other piece of African news we've got is that there is a new MTC being built in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo is a very curious country for the church at the moment because they've got a temple. It's close to the MTC, so the missionaries are going to be able to go there. But they've also got 3 more temples that have been announced. So they're going to have a total of 4 temples in that nation, which has grown rapidly since the church went there in the 1980s. They've got over 100,000 members there now. So it seems like the work is really booming there. The MTC is also going to be for French-speaking missionaries specifically.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. Yeah, I think that an MTC being built, to me, it's in this day and age probably a more robust indicator of sustainable or at least meaningful church growth than even a temple is. With the current kind of temple building spree, it's a bit difficult to use it as a proxy to evaluate the maturity and kind of how well established the church might be in a community, which that temples used to be an indicator of exactly that. But yeah, an MTC, that means that there are people that not just people that are going there, but local people that can run it, right? And that those language needs are there, that there's the capacity to teach on those. Like, I'll be very, I think with the temple spree is a little bit like, it feels like if we build it, they will come type of approach. Whereas, an MTC is a completely different type of operation in my view. So it's interesting to see.
Yeah, I feel like there's that need there. And I feel like maybe more missionaries are being called domestically
Yeah.
within that country, perhaps, just a speculation there.
Yeah, very much. I think that having grown up on a extremely high growth period in my country, high church growth period in the late 80s and through the 90s, and I've said this in previous episodes, I pray, I really hope that the way we manage this high growth in Africa is a bit more responsible than what it was in Chile. I think that as a church, I hope we learn the painful lessons from some of those South American countries that really exploded, and that the main issue was that it eventually, the leadership maturity was just not there to sustain the growth across all levels, local and general leaders. So I hope we approach it differently now, and I'm confident that it will be, because what we're seeing in Africa, it's probably one of the big bets, so to speak, for the church for its long-term expansion and growth and future in general. We're not seeing that here in Europe, right?
Yeah, we're seeing a shrink definitely in
we're
Europe,
seeing a
but in
shrink.
Africa, we're seeing the
Yeah,
growth. So
yeah. Well, we're seeing stagnation in most of South America. There are some countries that are still growing rapidly, like Peru, some areas in Asia as well. But by and large, Africa has been an outlier and a bit of a deja vu of what the 70s and 80s were in my continent. So I do hope that we manage it responsibly. Manage sounds bad, but that we drive real growth and not just kind of getting crazy growth and baptizing whatever we find on the streets and they don't even know they got baptized type of growth.
yeah,
But
definitely.
really excited to see this.
Absolutely. So, what should we talk about for our final piece of news? Because we have chatted and chatted this evening and we haven't got through nearly as much as we thought we would. So, Daniel, you choose the final thing that we will talk about.
This is a tough one because the last one that we have merits more time, but I'll just give a bit of a tease. Maybe we take some of this to the Patreon segment or to one of our future episodes. But this week is quite relevant as well for the Black community, especially in the US, with Juneteenth, which is the anniversary of the last. Oh, I hope I'm not misrepresenting this, but when the last notification of the abolition of slavery in the U.S. was communicated to them. And if I misrepresented that, I apologize. Please correct me. But it's been a while. But this is a very relevant month for Black history for that reason. And our church, as we know, has a complicated history on this topic, and that would be an understatement. There was a really interesting article by the Salt Lake Tribune, which informed me of a controversy I was not aware about from a few years ago. The title of the article will kind of tease what this is. the article is 6 years after, quote, fake apology for Black priesthood ban, and many Latter-day Saints yearn for a real one. So I read that title, and I know that some listeners, we have listeners from the entire spectrum of belief, very faithful, true believing members of the church, others that might have a more nuanced approach towards their testimony and faith and engagement with church, some that might not even have any sort of religious belief towards the church, but they do feel strongly connected culturally because they were raised Mormons or otherwise, others that are not members of the church, and for some reason they find an interest in listening to us and being connected to our church community and the adjacent community, right? But the Salt Lake Tribune, at least in the U.S., has a bit of a reputation of being very inquisitive of the church, being a bit of a check and balance to the Deseret News, for example, which is a church-owned newspaper in Utah. And because of that, many church members feel that the Salt Lake Tribune is going after true believing members and just they're basically an anti-Mormon machine. And I see why some perceive it that way. I don't agree with that. I do believe in a free press, and I do believe on holding people and whoever they may be, accountable, and in a way that helps. That helps us all. But now this article mentions something that happened. I think it was in May 2018. So just a few months after President Nelson was sustained and as the prophet and became the president of the church, that an allegedly, an apology letter allegedly written by the first presidency was circulating online, an apology regarding the priesthood and temple ban for members of African descent. And it looks like it circulated for a few hours during the day and created a lot of reactions. Many members were jubilant for it. Many others kind of wondering what this is. It was quite momentous, but it only lasted a few hours until it became known that it was a fake apology, that it never came from the first presidency or anything like that. And it opened up kind of that question. It was a bit of an experiment in hindsight, from what I gathered from the article, of where are we currently collectively as a church, both the institution, both the community of members and former members or member adjacent people in the community regarding this topic. It's been 46 years, I believe, since the priesthood and temple ban was lifted, and there's a lot still to do from it. And I do wonder, and the question that I had that maybe will be a rhetorical one because of time, is where do we stand on that? Do we have enough of a formed view? Especially you and I, none of us are part of the Black community in the US or elsewhere. We're ethnically from other groups. However, we are members of this church, and we do have to reckon with the reality of nearly 130 years where this policy was in place, with changing messaging around it. Some still believe that it was doctrinally mandated or inspired. Others argue that it was a policy and it was misguided and ultimately a reflection of the racism of the day, and that we should therefore apologize. It's a complex topic, but we do want to name it because it is part of what we need to reckon with. And I believe, and this is my take, what I will get to say about it now, is that looking the other way and pretending it did not happen, or trying to suppress it, or responding to talking about it as if we want to in any way affect the faith of anybody, I don't think that's right. I think we need to face it, and I think there is an opportunity for faith development by facing it honestly and being open to learning more about it in humility.
Yeah, I totally agree. And to be honest, I think we need to take this to Patreon, because I have so many more thoughts that I feel like need to be shared. And I feel like if we can encourage you to subscribe to Patreon for just a few dollars a month, you can hear our thoughts on this very topic.
This is the cliffhanger then, yeah.
It is. We've left it on a cliffhanger for the first time. But as always, we encourage you to subscribe, to share this podcast with people who may be interested, and to give us feedback, to send an email into contact@thisweekinmormons.com and let us know your thoughts. But for now, that's it from us. So we will see you later.
See you later in Patreon. Bye-bye.